Your seat is right here." The seat that Tabitha, the company president's daughter, pointed to had a sign that read "Middle School Graduate Idiot." When my daughter saw that, she couldn't hold back her tears and started crying. My anger erupted. "What is this place card? Stop insulting my daughter." I shouted at her, but Tabitha calmly responded, "Because it's the truth." I realized there was no reason to stay here any longer, so I stepped onto the stage and made an announcement. "Mr. Higgins, I can no longer tolerate this. So, both my daughter and I are quitting today." Tabitha didn't realize at that moment that those words would be the beginning of her downfall. My name is Aaron, and I am 45 years old. Since elementary school, I was always a kid who didn't stand out. I was never disliked, but I wasn't the type to lead my classmates with a bright and outgoing personality either. My grades were always in the middle. They were not good or bad, just average. I often spent time with a few friends who were just like me, always blending into the crowd during school events. I never felt dissatisfied with myself. I wasn't living a flashy or exciting life, but I never really wanted one either. I seriously believed, until around the end of elementary school, that I would live an ordinary life. You could say I had accepted my limits and made peace with it, but in truth, I had no ambition to achieve anything. To put it bluntly, I was a boring person. After I graduated from elementary school and moved on to middle school, my attitude remained the same. I entered a public high school that matched my academic level. Since I had no particular dreams for the future, I simply applied to the high school my homeroom teacher said I was likely to get into. Even in high school, my life continued the same way. My grades stayed around the middle. I didn't join any club activities, and I didn't belong to any committees. I attended classes regularly, and during breaks, I hung out with friends who were just like me. At that time, I assumed that after high school, I would go to a college within my reach and then work for a company that suited my abilities. But everything changed for me during the spring of my second year in high school. That day, my teacher asked me to return some teaching materials to the preparation room. I wasn't called on specifically, and I didn't volunteer for it. It was simply because I happened to be the classroom helper that day. But when I was about to head back to my classroom, I suddenly felt sick. To be precise, I had been feeling unwell since morning. I thought it was nothing serious and went to school anyway, but it kept getting worse. I didn't want the hassle of asking to leave early, so I figured I could just tough it out until classes ended, but that was clearly a mistake. "This is bad." I wanted to call for help, but no friends were around. I wasn't the kind of person who could easily call out to someone I didn't know. "I just need to get to the nurse's office." With unsteady steps, I headed there when suddenly a female student approached me. "Are you feeling unwell? Do you want to go to the nurse's office?" By that time, I didn't even have the energy to speak, so I just nodded. "Okay, hold on to me." That was how I met Kate. I learned her name and the fact that she was a third-year student only after I received treatment in the nurse's office, but with her slender arms, she helped me, who was bigger than her, get to the nurse's office. After that, even while I was being treated by the nurse, she stayed by my side. She even went back to my classroom to get my things, and she contacted my homeroom teacher for me. "Are you sure you can make it home alone? I can walk you if you want," Kate said, looking genuinely worried as she saw me off at the entrance. "I'm fine. I feel much better now. Thank you so much." Then, Kate chuckled softly. "There's only a 1-year difference between us, so you don't have to be so formal with me." That smile was the final push, and I fell in love with Kate. Until then, I had never dated anyone. I had experienced crushes before, but they always ended without me confessing my feelings. But when I fell for Kate, I realized that those past feelings weren't real love. Day and night, I couldn't stop thinking about her. It was the first time I had ever felt that way. But I was just an ordinary, unremarkable underclassman. I figured it would just end up as another one-sided crush. Or so I thought. Whenever I happened to pass Kate in the hallway, she would call out to me, That made me so happy that I started wandering around the hallways for no reason. If that kept up, I probably would have turned into some kind of stalker, but luckily, it never came to that. One day, Kate asked me with a serious look on her face, "Aaron, are you in any clubs?" When I told her I wasn't, her face immediately lit up. "Then, would you join the Sign Language Club?" The Sign Language Club, as the name suggests, was a club for learning sign language. It wasn't very popular, and at the time, it only had 10 members. 6 of them were seniors, so after Kate and her classmates graduated, the club would only have 4 members. At my high school, clubs needed at least 5 members to stay active. If new students joined, it would be fine, but if none did, the club would be shut down. If you, as a second-year student, join, we'll still have 5 members even after we graduate. Please, even if you're just an inactive member, would you join the Sign Language Club? I'll join, I answered immediately. Not as an inactive member, I'll participate properly. I've never done sign language before, though. Hearing that, Kate looked incredibly happy. Really? It's okay if you're a beginner. I'll teach you. That very day, I submitted the registration form and officially joined the club. Even though my main reason for joining was my selfish desire to be close to Kate, I started to become genuinely interested in sign language. Kate was a great teacher, and thanks to her, I improved rapidly. That motivated me even more, and I started buying study materials and practicing at home. It was the first time in my life I had been so passionate about something. Including me, there were 11 members in the Sign Language Club, but not everyone was dedicated. Some of them were practically inactive members. There were even times when it was just me and Kate alone, and it happened more often than I'd think. Spending so much time together, we naturally grew closer, and eventually we started dating. When I became her boyfriend, I felt like I was on top of the world. As fall deepened, I asked Kate about her future plans. "Kate, what are you planning to do after graduation? Are you going to college?" "No, I'm not going to college. I'm going to work. I actually have a job I've always dreamed of doing. I joined the Sign Language Club because it would help with that job, and I've already been accepted." "What? You should have told me earlier so I could celebrate with you." "So, what's the job?" Kate smiled shyly and said, "Promise you won't laugh," before continuing. "An inn attendant." "Wait, you mean like the people who serve food at inns?" "That's right. After I graduate, I'm going to work at an old traditional inn called Higgins." In that moment, my career path was set. Of course, I didn't say it out loud then, but in my heart, it was already decided. Choosing a job just because I wanted to be near her. Anyone who heard that would probably be astonished. But even now, I don't think that decision was a mistake. Thanks to Kate, my life became something richer than I ever imagined. After that, I started researching everything I could about working at an inn. I researched the traditional inn Higgins in great detail. And 1 year after Kate graduated, I followed in her footsteps and joined Higgins Moon, one of the inns under the Higgins Group. Kate had asked me, "Are you sure it's okay to decide your career for a reason like that?" But when I got the job, she was happy for me and even celebrated with me. Working at the same inn, our relationship progressed smoothly. Not long after I joined, people around us knew that we were a couple, and everyone watched over us warmly. And 5 years after I started working there, I was 25 and Kate was 26 when we got married. We asked Mr. Higgins to be our wedding officiant. 2 years after our marriage, our daughter Michelle was born. It was challenging to work at the inn, which included night shifts, while raising a child, but the manager and the staff were incredibly supportive. They adjusted our shifts so that Kate and I wouldn't both be working nights at the same time. And when Michelle got sick, they gladly covered our shifts. I was determined to protect my family and improve the inn that had given me so much, so I devoted myself to learning about hospitality services. I researched successful inns and worked hard to improve our services. As a result, Higgins Moon became one of the top performing inns within the Higgins Group. My efforts were recognized, and 10 years after Michelle was born, when I was 35, I was promoted to site manager. Kate was also promoted around the same time, becoming the head in attendant. But 3 years later, when Michelle entered middle school, Kate began complaining about her health. Suddenly, she would be struck by dizziness so severe that she couldn't even stand, making it impossible for her to continue working as an inn attendant. Kate went to the hospital for tests. The results showed it was a rare, incurable disease. Kate fought with everything she had, going in and out of the hospital repeatedly. Michelle took on most of the housework and cared for her mother with everything she had, but despite all the treatments, 3 years after she first got sick, Kate passed away. It was during the winter of Michelle's 16th year. The sense of loss I felt was enormous, but for Michelle, it seemed even greater. She barely ate, shutting herself away. She couldn't even go to school. Because she had been so busy with housework and caring for her mother, she hadn't made any friends in high school, so she had no one to talk to. It was when I brought a meal to her room, desperately hoping she would at least eat something. Mom went to heaven because of me. She said it so suddenly that I was stunned. There's no way it's your fault, Michelle. Your mother was sick. Why would you think it was because of you? Mom came home from the hospital sometimes, right? That was because of me. I said I was too busy with housework and couldn't join any clubs or make friends. So, Mom pushed herself to come back and do the housework. After saying that, Michelle broke into tears. It's my fault. I made her overwork herself. If she had stayed in the hospital, she could have lived longer. No, that's not it. It wasn't your fault. Your mother loved you so much. That's why she wanted to come home and spend as much time with you as she could. But Michelle couldn't accept that. My struggles were nothing compared to what Mom went through. She was in so much more pain. No, that's not true. None of this is your fault. The disease is the only thing to blame. All I could do was hold Michelle as she cried uncontrollably and repeat those words over and over. There was no way I could leave Michelle alone in that state. Thinking that, I consulted with the manager and the rest of the staff at the inn. They adjusted my work hours to take me off night shifts, and during the daytime, the inn attendants who had been close to Kate took turns staying with Michelle. They would often tell Michelle stories about Kate and how much she had cherished her. During the day, the inn attendants would share memories of Kate and how deeply she loved Michelle, and at night, I would tell her stories of how Kate and I first met. About a year passed living like that, and I began to feel that Michelle was starting to recover. That was when I brought up the topic of high school with her. Her high school had allowed her to take a leave of absence so she could return any time. When I told her that, Michelle shook her head. I'm not going back to high school. I want to become a cool inn attendant just like my mom. It seemed that the stories the inn attendants had shared during the daytime had left a deep impression on her. I understood her feelings, but I couldn't bring myself to agree. I'm not against you becoming an inn attendant. I think you could be just as amazing as Kate was, but I want you to at least finish high school. Both your mother and I graduated before starting work. I'm telling you, I'm not going back because I don't see any point in going to that high school. The truth was, the high school Michelle had enrolled in was quite low ranking for someone of her academic ability. Because she had been busy with housework and caring for her mother, she hadn't been able to properly study for entrance exams, even though her grades were quite good. But on the day of the exam for her first choice school, Kate's condition suddenly worsened, and Michelle couldn't attend the test. With no other options, she ended up going to her backup school, but it seemed she never managed to fit in. If that's the case, why don't you try taking the entrance exam for your first choice school again? There's no need. If I did that, it would take 3 more years before I could start working, right? That's pointless. No, but still, no matter what you say, I'm going to become an inn attendant. In the end, I couldn't change Michelle's mind. You're just like your mother. I muttered that without thinking. Kate had always been kind and gentle, but when she made up her mind about something, she wouldn't budge, no matter what anyone said. Really? Michelle asked with a smile, clearly happy to hear it. Yeah, I never won a single argument with Kate. I bet. Michelle smiled happily, and seeing her smile for the first time in so long, I thought to myself, this was the right choice. Michelle took the entrance exam for Higgins and passed with flying colors. Thanks to Mr. Higgins' arrangements, she joined me at Higgins Moon. Watching Michelle work so hard reminded me of Kate. It wasn't just me, and all the staff seemed to feel the same way. Everyone adored Michelle, and she grew rapidly in her role as an inn attendant. Higgins Moon, with its warm, family-like atmosphere, was something I was deeply proud of. 3 years after Michelle started working, the manager of Higgins Moon was replaced. The new manager was Tabitha, now 26 years old, the second daughter of Mr. Higgins. I heard she had been studying abroad and had just returned to Japan. On the day she took office, the entire staff gathered to welcome her. It's been a while, Tabitha. Tabitha frowned with clear displeasure. You should call me Ms. Higgins. It's not like it was 10 years ago. The truth was, 10 years ago, when she was 16, Tabitha had worked briefly as an inn attendant at Higgins Moon. At the time, she had failed her high school entrance exams and spent her days idling around. Her father, Mr. Higgins, worried about her future, ordered her to work at Higgins Moon. Kate, who was the head inn attendant at the time, was responsible for training Tabitha. But Tabitha constantly looked down on the work of an inn attendant and skipped out whenever she could, which caused Kate a lot of trouble. In the end, Tabitha quit after about 3 months. From what I heard, she was kept at home to study, and the following year, she managed to enter high school. You're the husband of that head inn attendant from back then, aren't you? I heard she's no longer with us. Her mocking tone irritated me, but she was my superior after all. Yes, she passed away 4 years ago due to illness. Oh, I'm so sorry. What a shame. At first, I thought she was offering condolences, but that wasn't what she meant by what a shame. I was planning to fire her as soon as I became the manager of Higgins Moon. But since she's not here anymore, I can't fire her. What a real shame. At those words, the entire staff turned their eyes to Michelle. Michelle was trembling with rage. I saw one of the staff gently put their arms around her shoulders, and I spoke up. Terminating someone without just cause is an act that undermines managerial trust. I would advise against it. Oh, insulting the daughter of the president isn't a just cause? Kate, my wife, she didn't insult you. I wanted to say that she was only trying to train her properly as the inn attendant, but I never got the chance. I studied hotel management abroad for over 5 years. I plan to reform Higgins Moon my way. If anyone opposes me, I will fire them without hesitation, so keep that in mind. The staff looked at Tabitha with anxious eyes as she made that declaration, but she seemed completely unaware of their concerns, full of confidence. The first thing Tabitha said to me was, "The site manager is not just supposed to handle customer service. Have you actually mapped out any vision for the future?" Of course I have. At Higgins Moon, I want us to welcome each guest with the warmth of family, providing a place that feels like home. At that, Tabitha burst out laughing. What era do you think this is? It doesn't fit in today's world. From that point on, we, the staff, were constantly at the mercy of Tabitha. The first thing she did was distribute work manuals to all of us. The tasks were laid out in flowchart form, step by step, according to each job role. Follow these instructions. I won't tolerate anyone acting on their own. But each guest has different needs, and sometimes we need to handle things differently based on the situation. My objection was immediately dismissed. Changing the way you serve people based on who they are is unfair, don't you think? The next thing Tabitha did was start laying off staff. She fired almost all the part-time employees and temporary workers and kept only the full-time employees. We can't manage with this number of people. We need more staff. Oh, if you follow the manual I created, it should work fine with the current number. Why do we have to reduce staff? It's not like we were running at a loss. Tabitha gave me a look of disbelief. Sure, It was profitable, barely profitable. That's not good enough. We need to make more money. I understood that an inn is a business, and we couldn't survive with losses. Of course, profit is important, but cutting staff would only lead to a decline in service quality and put more strain on the remaining employees. Who would benefit from that kind of profit? I had plenty I wanted to say, but by then, I already knew it was pointless. Even though the staff was busier due to the reduced numbers, everyone tried their best to maintain the same level of customer service. One day, a guest with a hearing impairment came to the front desk. The front desk staff said, "Go call Aaron or Michelle." That was because only the two of us knew sign language. Michelle had learned it from Kate during her time in the hospital. When I heard the staff call out, I headed to the front desk, but Tabitha was there, and she was furious. The front desk staff should handle the front desk work. Calling an inn attendant over is absolutely unacceptable. Luckily, the guest couldn't hear her. I stepped in for the front desk staff and communicated with the guest in sign language. When the guest realized I could communicate with them, they looked visibly relieved, but Tabitha's anger did not subside. Doing things off the manual disrupts harmony. Haven't you learned that after all these years? I knew it was pointless to argue, so I didn't say anything back. But as things like this continued, the staff's morale began to drop. One by one, fewer staff members tried to go the extra mile for the guests, unwilling to oppose Tabitha. Only a few remained dedicated, and Michelle was one of them. One time, a guest with a baby came to the front desk, and the baby suddenly started crying loudly. Michelle, who happened to be nearby, noticed and said, "We can do the check-in later. Please come with me," and led the guest to a private room. Michelle helped the guest change the baby's diaper and prepare some milk, even handling the check-in process right there in the room. The guest thanked Michelle and went to their room feeling relieved, but when Tabitha heard about it, she berated Michelle. "You still don't understand a single thing I say. I keep telling you that deviating from the routine disrupts harmony." From that day on, Michelle was no longer allowed to interact with guests. Even if I scheduled her for customer service, Tabitha would use her managerial authority to change the shift. Michelle was only assigned behind-the-scenes tasks, organizing bedding, cleaning rooms after checkout, and things like that. The other in attendance felt sorry for Michelle, but none of them could go against the manager. Michelle herself never complained and simply endured it quietly. I couldn't hold back any longer and voiced my objection, but Tabitha just sneered. "That girl is a middle school graduate, isn't she? I can't have someone that incompetent interacting with our guests. It would ruin the reputation of Higgins Moon. Michelle may not have gone to high school, but she is far from incompetent. I wish you'd stop being such a doting father. Do you not understand that just because she's the site manager's daughter, she doesn't get any special treatment?" If anything, my objection only made things worse. Tabitha's treatment of Michelle grew harsher by the day. She would exaggerate Michelle's minor mistakes, making them seem like major failures, and then berate her in front of everyone. At every opportunity, she would hurl insults like "incompetent," "we don't need someone like you," and "stop trying to flirt with the guests." Despite the harsh treatment, Michelle endured it in silence. But as both her father and the site manager, I couldn't just stand by and watch. I approached Mr. Higgins and explained the situation, asking if Michelle could be transferred to another location. But Mr. Higgins' answer was no. I can't override Tabitha as the manager and make personnel changes without her consent. So I asked her about it, but she said she wants to keep Michelle at Higgins Moon. Hearing that, I felt like I finally understood the real reason behind Tabitha's harassment. It wasn't just because Michelle had only graduated from middle school. It was also because she was Kate's daughter. I realized that Tabitha still held a grudge from when she was 16, being strictly trained by Kate, who was the head inn attendant at the time. I said to Mr. Higgins, "Is there any way you can use your authority as the president to do something about this?" He sighed and said, "I feel terrible for you and Michelle, but," and then began to explain the situation. Originally, I had planned for my eldest daughter to take over Higgins. She was incredibly talented, and I thought she would be the perfect successor. So, I never expected anything from my younger daughter, Tabitha. But it turned out that his eldest daughter, perhaps because she was too capable, left, refusing to take over the business. That's when he had to call Tabitha back from studying abroad. Compared to her older sister, who was always praised for her excellence, Tabitha demanded that she be given complete control if she was going to take over. I admit I neglected Tabitha. That was my mistake. That's why I want to respect her now. I could understand Mr. Higgins' feelings, but that didn't justify Michelle having to suffer for it. I told Michelle everything that Mr. Higgins had said. The reason you can't transfer is entirely because of Mr. Higgins' situation. You don't have to endure this. Honestly, I think it would be better if you just quit Higgins. But Michelle shook her head. I'm not quitting, because if I quit now, I can't prove that my mom was right. Michelle had realized that the reason Tabitha was so harsh to her stemmed from her past with Kate. Tabitha said my mom was mean to her, but I don't believe it. She would never do that. That's right. I saw it with my own eyes. Your mother only did what was necessary as the head in attendant. She had to be strict because Tabitha was so irresponsible. Your mother did nothing wrong. That's why I'm not quitting. For my mom's honor. I'm going to do my best. As usual, Michelle's determination was firm, and I couldn't change her mind. Amidst all this, Higgins Group announced its 80th anniversary celebration. Every employee working for Higgins was invited, so of course Michelle and I, along with the staff from Higgins Moon, were all going to attend. On the day of the ceremony, Michelle and I headed to the venue together. At the table marked Higgins Moon, several familiar staff members were already seated. As we approached, they glanced at Michelle with uncomfortable expressions. Feeling something was off, I began searching for our place cards. I quickly found mine labeled Aaron, but I couldn't find Michelle's. As we stood there confused, Tabitha approached Michelle. Your seat is right here. On the place card, it read middle school graduate idiot. In that instant, Michelle's patience shattered. She burst into tears, and the other in attendance surrounded her, trying to comfort her. My own anger erupted as well. What is this place card? Stop insulting my daughter. I shouted at her, but Tabitha remained completely unfazed. Because it's the truth. And by the way, I've heard that your daughter is famous at other ends too for being a middle school graduate. That was partly true. But the phrase wasn't for being a middle school graduate. It was despite being a middle school graduate. Despite being a middle school graduate, she was known as an exceptionally skilled attendant. But that didn't matter to Tabitha. It seems more people know her as a middle school graduate than by her name, so I made the place card easy to understand. Besides, isn't it strange for a middle school graduate to attend this kind of event? She should have had the decency to stay home. Michelle is an employee of Higgins. She has every right to be here. I studied hotel management overseas for 5 whole years. Do you have any idea how much effort I put into getting to where I am now? I don't want to share the same space with a middle school graduate who's never worked for anything. Hearing that, I decided there was no need to stay any longer. I leaned in and whispered to Michelle, who had finally stopped crying after being comforted by her fellow in attendance. Michelle, can you leave the rest to me? Michelle nodded silently. There was a stage set up for the event, and the MC was preparing to begin. I stepped up onto the stage and asked the MC if I could borrow the microphone. As the crowd murmured in confusion, I spoke through the microphone, addressing Mr. Higgins. I apologize for the interruption. My name is Aaron, the site manager of Higgins Moon. Mr. Higgins, I can no longer tolerate this. So, my daughter and I raised my voice even louder. We're quitting today. The room erupted into chaos, and Mr. Higgins stood up in shock. I apologize for the disturbance. As of today, both Michelle and I will be resigning. After saying that, I handed the microphone back to the MC and returned to Michelle. Michelle, let's go home. I took Michelle's hand, and walked out of the venue. As we stepped into the hallway and were about to leave, the doors to the event hall opened. I turned to see what was happening, and one after another, the staff of Higgins Moon began to pour out. When they spotted us, they started calling out things like, "Aaron, that was amazing," and "We walked out too. We couldn't stand to stay there anymore." I was stunned. If they did this, they would all get fired too. "You guys don't have to do this. You don't need to get dragged into our problems. This is between me and Michelle." The staff exchanged glances and then gave me defiant smiles. The next day at Higgins Moon was pure chaos. This was something I only heard about later. The day after the ceremony, not only Michelle and I, but almost all of the staff did not show up for work. The only ones who came in were the manager, Tabitha, and a handful of her close aides. One after another, the staff had all called and saying they couldn't come in due to illness. When the night shift staff, who hadn't attended the ceremony, finished their shift and left, only a handful of people were left to work. They couldn't clean the rooms or prepare to welcome guests. There were no kitchen staff either, so it was impossible to serve dinner. By the afternoon, guests started arriving for check-in, but there were no front desk staff to greet them. The inn couldn't function, and Tabitha panicked, crying to Mr. Higgins. "I don't know what to do. Daddy, help me." But Mr. Higgins' response was stern. "There are reservations. You'll have to handle it with the staff you have." Apparently, Mr. Higgins had been appalled by Tabitha's behavior at the ceremony and regretted how much he had spoiled her. Still, he couldn't allow the inn's reputation to suffer, so he arranged for staff from other locations to come and help out. But because it was so sudden, there weren't nearly enough people, and since they weren't familiar with Higgins Moon, mistakes were inevitable. To make matters worse, they couldn't even get extra kitchen staff, so they had to rely on a delivery service for dinner. As a result, complaints poured into the front desk like, "The food tastes awful. It's not the same as what's in the brochure. The rooms are dirty. Staff don't come when I call. And it doesn't match the image from the website." Some guests even said, "We're switching to a different inn, so give us a refund." And many followed suit. When Mr. Higgins finally rushed to Higgins Moon, Tabitha, shaking with frustration, complained to him. Everything was working fine before. If the staff hadn't skipped out, it would have been fine. I could have done this better. To that, Mr. Higgins spoke to her gently, as if trying to reason with her. "You were only able to do well because Aaron and the rest of the staff were supporting you. But you belittled those people and refused to recognize their efforts. I only belittled Michelle, the others." As Tabitha tried to make excuses, Mr. Higgins shouted, "Do you still not understand? All the staff here cared deeply about Michelle. That was because of her own hard work. Academic background and effort are not the same thing. What am I supposed to do? You need to bring Aaron and Michelle back as soon as possible. If you don't, this inn is finished." The next day, Tabitha came to my house. She looked exhausted and tried to offer an apology to Michelle and me. I stopped her. "You mocked Michelle for being a middle school graduate, but not going to high school didn't mean she was incompetent." My wife fell ill back then. Michelle took care of her tirelessly, but my wife eventually passed away. Hearing those words, Michelle, standing beside me, began to tear up, remembering that time. Michelle was so devastated by her mother's death that she couldn't go back to high school. But she spent a year pulling herself back together and decided she wanted to become an inn attendant just like her mother. She worked incredibly hard. Please don't say she didn't make an effort. Tabitha looked down, unable to find any words to respond. Call me a doting father if you want, but no matter how busy she was, Michelle never forgot to smile. She always tried to provide personalized service to every guest. She's a professional inn attendant. That was exactly what Kate aimed to be. Tabitha's head shot up, but she couldn't say anything and looked back down. Warm, personal service for our guests. That's what Higgins Moon has always valued the most. That belief wasn't just mine and Michelle's, and it was shared by every single staff member. So that's why everyone called in sick yesterday. The Higgins Moon that exists now is no longer the inn we cherished. That's what we all felt. At that moment, the doorbell rang. When I answered it, Mr. Higgins was standing there. I am truly sorry for what happened. As the president and as a father, I failed. Please forgive me, he said, bowing deeply. Next to him, Tabitha also bowed her head. Tabitha will be removed from her position as the manager of Higgins Moon. She will not be returning there. Please, will you come back? Before I could respond, Michelle spoke up. I understand how you feel, Mr. Higgins. But is that really enough for Tabitha? Is there nothing you want to say? Prompted by Michelle's question, Tabitha hesitated but finally opened her mouth. I really am sorry for what I did to you and Aaron. I realize it now. I think I might have been jealous of you, Michelle. Michelle looked surprised, and Tabitha began to talk about her past. Ever since she was young, Tabitha had always been compared to her older sister. Her grades, appearance, and athletic ability, her sister had always been better at everything. Her father would always say, "You're the successor of Higgins Moon," while showing affection toward her older sister. My parents weren't exactly mean to me. They let me do whatever I wanted, but in a way that just meant they didn't expect anything from me. It hurt. Wanting to be recognized, she took the entrance exam for the same high school her sister attended but failed. When she asked to take a year off and try again, her father told her to work as an inn attendant at Higgins Moon instead. That's when I realized that I really wasn't expected to do anything. That's why I rebelled against Kate. She tried so hard to train me, even though it was for my own good. I'm sorry. Tabitha bowed her head to Michelle, as if apologizing to Kate in her place. After that, Tabitha was sent to study abroad. I felt like I was being thrown away. I didn't even want to go abroad, but I studied hard anyway. I wanted to be recognized someday. When her older sister left home and she was called back, she finally thought her chance had come. I thought I finally had a chance to show what I could do, but the staff didn't expect anything from me. The one at the center of it all was Michelle. What? Me? Michelle looked genuinely surprised, and I couldn't help but chuckle. Back then, Higgins Moon was running with Michelle at its heart. She hadn't realized it, but everyone looked up to her thinking, what would Michelle do? And followed her example. That's why I was so frustrated. I kept wondering what all my efforts were for. As she poured her heart out, Tabitha finally broke down in tears, and Mr. Higgins gently put his arm around her shoulders. I'm sorry. I truly am. I never meant to compare you to your sister. I just thought, unlike your serious sister, you would be happier living freely. I realize now I was wrong. From now on, I want to face you properly. It may be too late, but I want to try. It's never too late, Mr. Higgins. When I said, Mr. Higgins murmured, thank you. While he comforted the still sobbing Tabitha, Mr. Higgins left our house. After that, Tabitha formally resigned from her position as manager of Higgins Moon. I heard that she started over from scratch as an inn attendant at another inn within the Higgins group. It seemed like her relationship with her father was improving, and even though it wasn't my business, I felt relieved. And then, I was appointed as the new manager of Higgins Moon. Are you sure it should be me? After causing that commotion at the ceremony, I was grateful just to be able to return to work. On top of that, a promotion. I wasn't sure if I should accept it. As I struggled with the decision, it was Mr. Higgins who gave me the push I needed. Who else would be the manager if not you? If you don't take this position, Higgins Moon will be finished. The staff at Higgins Moon also encouraged me, saying things like, we feel safe if Aaron is the manager. It has to be Aaron. And if you don't take it, I'm quitting. I understand. I will do my best as the manager. However, restoring the reputation of Higgins Moon, which had fallen to rock bottom, was not going to be easy. Since Tabitha had taken over as manager, the inn's reputation had gradually declined. Online reviews mentioned things like, the staff's attitude is cold, they don't accommodate our needs, and the warmth of the place is gone. The business had been going downhill. Then, that one day, The chaos after the ceremony was the final blow that completely destroyed its reputation. Losing trust happens quickly, but earning it back takes time. Still, I didn't feel rushed. We've had tough times before. All we can do is continue to serve our guests with care. Let's all get through this together. The only way to regain trust was to take things one day at a time, carefully and with dedication. As for Michelle, she's still working happily as an inn attendant. But there is one thing that has changed. Michelle is now attending an online high school. When I talk to the guests, I realize there are so many things I don't know. You were right, Dad. I should have gone to high school. I understand that now, she told me. However, she didn't want to quit her job as an inn attendant, so she chose to study through an online program. When I graduate from high school, I want to go to college too. I'll probably have to work part-time instead of full-time, but I'm not quitting my job as an inn attendant. I have to earn the tuition money myself. I offered to pay her college tuition as her father, but Michelle shook her head. No, I want to pay for it myself. Isn't it kind of cool if I'm going to college with money I earned on my own? Her bright smile looked exactly like Kate's. One day, the head inn attendant came up to me and spoke. Michelle is looking more and more like Kate these days. I think so too. Then, she leaned in close and whispered to me. Michelle is planning to go to college, right? By the time she graduates, I'll be 60 and ready to retire. I was thinking, maybe Michelle could be the next head inn attendant. Isn't that a little too soon? At that moment, Michelle spotted us from a distance and called out, You too. Stop chatting and get back to work. Yes, ma'am, the inn attendant replied, winking at me. Honestly, Michelle might really have what it takes. Kate became head inn attendant at the age of 34. At the time, they said it was the youngest in history, but Michelle might break that record. No, I was sure she would. Michelle might become an even greater inn attendant than you. I quietly spoke those words to Kate in heaven. Then, I could almost hear Kate's voice respond. Of course she will. After all, she's our daughter.